just like mute their mics for now. And then if you guys have something to say, just feel free to unmute at any time. So yeah, I guess we'll just start really briefly. So I'm just gonna introduce myself. So my name is Reem. I'm the editor-in-chief of Falastin magazine, and we're gonna go a little bit more into detail about like what Falastin magazine is and what our mission is in a few minutes. But I just want to invite our other editors, Mara and Asid, to introduce themselves briefly.
Go ahead, Asid.
Hi, everyone. I've been involved with the magazine since the beginning, which is super exciting, all three of us. I am a student in Montclair, completely studying something that's not political or writing. It's just one of my passions. So magazine is a way for me to keep being involved within the Palestinian community, as well as keep me engaged within politics.
My name is Marah Siam. I go to Rutgers University in Newark. I am an English major, so this is like my alley. And yeah, we've all been involved since the beginning, so I hope you've been liking the magazine so far.
Okay, awesome. So just a little bit of history about Falastin magazine. If you've never seen like a copy in person, this is what it looks like. This was our most recent issue. So this is our March edition, and it released in March, and March is Women's History Month. So the theme of like the inside of the magazine was women's history. We had an interview with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib that we were able to conduct when she came and visited the center. So that was really awesome. But yeah, so the magazine was founded in August 2016 after PAC's HOPE program, which is HOPE stands for Holding On to Palestinian Existence, and it's a summer program just for like Palestinian youth to just learn more about like their identity and to just engage with that. And so Rania came to me with the idea, Rania Mustafa, the executive director, she came to me with the idea to start a literary magazine, and subhanAllah, the pieces just all fell into place. You know, we had like editors that were like really good at like Arabic, and they just jumped onto the team. Marah and Asil have been there since the very beginning. You know, Rania's been amazing, like facilitating and being a great advisor to this. And so we've gotten together, and subhanAllah, it's been 4 years now, so we're in our 4th volume. And yeah, so we named the magazine Falastin after a Palestinian newspaper of the same name. And that newspaper was created in 1911 in Jaffa. And the important thing to note about this newspaper is it's noted as one of like the main proofs of Palestinian existence prior to 1948. So like a common like Zionist like argument that they like to say is that like Palestinians didn't have like a set identity prior to 1948, and that Palestinian identity arose in response to the creation of Israel. And there's a lot of proofs to counter that, obviously, like, you know, our grandparents and great-grandparents are just living proof of that. But the Falastin newspaper served as like a very like clear, like documented proof that we had an identity, like a national identity and an existence far prior to like anything else. And so we hope to mirror that idea with Falastin magazine. So pretty much, you know, like just as the newspaper served as a proof of Palestinian existence, our magazine, we hope, is something that will prove not only like our existence, but that we have a voice and a narrative and that we're using it. And so with that said, our biggest goal is to reclaim our narrative. Just to kind of like take anything from the audience, does anyone have any like thoughts on like what does it mean to reclaim our narrative? Or like where has our narrative been if we haven't been able to reclaim it?
Hi everyone, sorry I joined late. This is Najah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Najah. Thank you.
Okay, nice. I think when we're talking about the narrative, it's always about like rebuttaling the Zionist narrative, you know? It's always about like responding to the attack versus, you know, having like the audacity or like the creative freedom to just think about, you know, what does it mean to represent us? Like how do we want freedom to look like? Like, well, what do we envision? I think like most of the time we're like rebuttaling. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Najah. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a really important point that like sometimes we always place ourselves in like the defense position, or like we're not actually like talking about like our narratives of what it means to be Palestinian. And I think that we have such a strong identity like outside of you know, like anything that's been done to us, like the occupation and everything. That's an important part of being Palestinian, but that's not the only thing. And so I think it's really amazing that, you know, we're able to come together through art, through music. And, you know, there's a history of art being used as resistance. If you look at like hip hop and rap, like that's like a really modern way, you know, talks to combat injustice. If you think of like the Mexican artist Frida Kahlo, she uses art to combat beauty standards. And even in South Africa, to combat apartheid, resistance art was a very, very huge thing, because people would create art, like political art, and use it as like murals and graffiti, and they'd walk around and wear it. So art as resistance is, you know, it's been something that's been going on for a very long time, but it also has a very, very special and important place in Palestinian resistance specifically. I think we all know like Ghassan Kanafani and Mahmoud Darwish. And like, I think something important to know about them is that oftentimes when we think about Ghassan Kanafani and Mahmoud Darwish, their most notorious poems are the ones that are like very political in nature. But they also have lots of poetry and like writing. Like Ghassan Kanafani writes a lot of short stories about like what it's like to be Palestinian, and like that's resistance too. So I think that's the really important thing about that. And even Mahmoud Darwishi writes poetry about like coffee and about love. And so I think that, you know, like through art, through culture, through music, we're able to prove that we exist, and that we have an identity. And so, you know, like just like as like a proof of like how powerful art as resistance is. In July 2016, one of Mahmoud Darwish's poems, ID Card, which if you've ever been to like the center, you've heard this poem like recited. There's like a young girl who recites it beautifully, mashallah. But it's like pretty much a poem talking about like the Hawiya, which is like the Palestinian ID card. And he's saying like Sajjal ana Arabi, like write down I'm an Arab, which shows like pride and like Arab identity. But in July 2016, this poem was broadcasted by an Israeli radio, and it made such headlines and like caused such outrage in Israel that the defense minister had to make a statement against it. And so that just shows like the power of like resistance and art. So like, where does Falastin magazine come in on this? So we did some research before we made this claim, but we are the only multilingual Palestinian American magazine. You know, and I think the important thing about that is that, you know, we're able to unite people, not only like people who are English speakers or Arabic speakers, but people all over the diaspora. We've had over 200 writers and artists from all over the world. And when I say like all over the world, I truly mean like in places where you don't expect to have a large Palestinian presence. We have like artists and writers from like Austria and Belgium, from Italy. We've had artists and writers from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and all throughout the Middle East, obviously throughout Palestine as well, and Gaza and everything. And then all throughout the United States too, like in pockets where you don't think there's like a lively like Palestinian scene. Like in our last issue, like our March edition, 3 of the artists in here were from Milwaukee, which like you wouldn't expect to have like so many like really proud Palestinians there. So yeah, our goal though in the end is to give you a place to express yourself. And this can be done through many different ways. You know, we accept art, poetry, photography. You know, a lot of people tell me like, you know, I want to get involved in the magazine, but I'm not like a strong writer, or like I'm just not a writer. One, that's not true. Everyone has a story to tell, so everyone can write, but that's not the only way to express yourself. And so we're very open to like different ideas. So if someone's even sending in like an architectural design for our next issue, which will like come into like our theme, which one of our editors will talk about more in detail later. But yeah, so if you have any ideas and you feel like it's not like your idea is not like representative, or you don't have this space in this magazine, email me, reach out to me, and we'll definitely be able to make a space for it, inshallah. So yeah, we're very flexible with that. So our deadline for the upcoming issue was March 20th, but we're extending it to Monday, March 30th, because we know these are like really tough times, but we hope, inshallah, that everyone can use Falastin magazine as a way to kind of de-stress and get away from everything. So if you haven't been able to like, go to PAC and like pick up physical copies, that's okay, because the magazine's online. I'm going to show you guys how to access it right now. Okay. So you have to go, so you go to pacusa.org. Is everyone, can you guys like nod if you see my screen? Okay, perfect. Okay, so you go to pacusa.org, and then you just go to programs under literary magazine, and then past issues. And we have like a plethora of like things you can choose from. So like I'll just scroll through our latest one. And so yeah, you can just scroll through it, you know, Sunday morning with your coffee you want something nice and light to read. So yeah, so it's free and everyone can just access them. We have all of our issues online there. Okay, let me just stop sharing. Okay. So yeah, if anyone has any questions on like how to submit, just email me. So to submit, all you have to do is just send me like your piece as like a Google Doc, or just a Microsoft Word or PDF or JPEG, like depending on whatever you're sending. And my email is litmagazine@pacusa.org. I'll write that in like the chat later, but it's litmagazine@pacusa.org. And if you guys have any ideas and you want to just soundboard or you just want to like brainstorm with me, email me and I'd be more than happy to like flesh out an idea with anybody. So yeah, that's it. Let me know if you guys have any questions. And if not, I'm just switching for Marah, who's one of our editors. She's also a really good artist, so you should check out her Instagram, mashallah. But yeah, she's gonna talk about the theme of this issue.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ryu. So I'm going to be talking about the next issue, which is Volume 4, Issue 3. For every single issue, have a theme. So for example, like Reem said, last issue, it was in March, so it was Women's Month, so obviously the theme was women. But this theme for the next issue is the future of Palestine. And that's extremely broad, but kind of what we wanted to focus on was your individual experience, and how that plays into what you would imagine Palestine to look like if it were free. Of course, it's a lot harder to envision Palestine would look like in 20 years because we don't even know what we're gonna look like in 3 weeks because of all this stuff. But so yeah, so what do you think, or what do you want Palestine to look like if it were free in the future? And this doesn't have to mean that if you've been to Palestine or anything like that. It's your specific experience and your narrative, because that's important. Even if you haven't been, even if you don't have a connection to the land, if you're not even Palestinian or anything, it's just what your experience is, how you're going to use that to create this image of a free Palestine and what that means to you. And you can choose whatever medium, for example, like art or poetry or just a prose piece or even an article, or like Reem said, an architectural piece, anything, whatever medium that you're good at and that you like, you can use that to kind of bring your idea to life on what Palestine will look like. And kind of like, I want to really emphasize that it's not about the broad idea, it's about like you and your specific story, because if we wanted something super general, then that's easy to come up with, but people's individual stories are what's important, and that's what we really like to highlight in this magazine, is your name and your story and the medium that you choose. So to further piggyback off of the theme, Asid is going to now open up the discussion board, and now we can discuss what that future is going to look like for you, and maybe even discuss like the types of mediums that you guys like, or the kind of mediums that you guys frequently use to bring to life your ideas, like I said. So Asil, take the floor.
Yes, thank you, Marah. So just to kind of give you an idea, if you guys, first of all, want to share your experiences, just like cut me off at any time. The floor is yours. An idea like that I want you guys to share your experiences with. There is a video that I saw earlier of an interview, and it was 3 siblings, the oldest sister. She was saying how she can't go to Jerusalem and pray there just because of her Palestinian identity. And she's no more than 12 years old, and she's just bawling her tears out. She's like, this is my homeland and I can't go there. And that's an experience for her that she would like to see when she's older, for her to be able to go to Jerusalem and pray. So what experience, for those of you, we'll start off for those of you who have been to Falastin, what experiences would you guys have liked to change? Floor is all yours, guys.
I can start, unless someone else wants to jump in. So I'm Rania. I'm very proud of the young ladies who are presenting and doing an amazing job. So for me, I think Asid, your example really hit home. This past summer, I actually went to Palestine, and it was my first summer not being able to go into Jerusalem. and it really hit me. I have a Hawiya, and it's the first time I go to Palestine with my daughter, who is a year and a half, and I really, really, really wanted to go with her to Quds and show her, the only place on earth that can literally bring me to tears within seconds notice. And unfortunately, I was unable to get in, and it really broke my heart. So, yeah, that would be the number one thing I'd want changed.
Yeah, definitely, for your daughter to experience it, even in the future, inshallah, when you go there in a couple of years and she's older, to remember Palestine, the freedom to travel, that's so important, and that's so limited within Palestinians. What's another experience that you guys would have liked to change?
I actually had like a very similar experience with Rani. This was my first time ever going to Palestine and then not being able to go to Jerusalem. And also so I also have a Hawiya, so I'm limited in the places I can go. I can only travel inside of the West Bank. And this summer I went to Palestine. This is one of the first summers that most of my cousins who don't have Hawiyas, they're all like American citizens, they also all came. And I just remember like me and my sister just like sitting in like our house like crying because like everyone was going to like these really cool trips like Haifa and Yafa and like being able to visit, and like we were the only ones out of like my cousins on my mom's side that had Hawiyas, so like we couldn't go anywhere. And everyone was just like out here touring Palestine, and they came back and I'm just like, I've been here so many times and I've never seen the places you guys visited. And so like I think being able to like go where you want to go and just like like being free in that sense, yeah, that's something I'd like to change.
Wow, that's really hard. I don't have a Hawiya, so I came into Falastin for the first time in January, and I didn't have that restriction, thank God. But no, that's tough. Thank you, Reem and Rania. Do any of you guys would like to share anything before I go on to the next question?
I guess I'll like kind of do the opposite of like you guys' experience, because I also have a WIA, just like Reem and Rania. But this summer I was there and I got the privilege of getting like a tasriyah, which is basically a permit allowing me to go into like 48. So I actually did go to Haifa and Yafa, and I've only been like once before when I was like 12. I've never like been there as like an adult, and understanding the full scope. And it's not that I would want to change it because touching just the sand was enough for me, but it really like hurt just being there and seeing kind of like my parents' face change from what they knew Haifa and Yafa were to what they were now. So I guess the only thing I would change is like maybe even not going and keeping the memory of the original Haifa and Yafa that my parents had versus the experience that I had seeing what they did to it and how much they kind of made it into like a vacation place that didn't have any meaning to anybody other than an ocean.
Would you have preferred to go by yourself instead? Or like with friends, not your parents?
I don't think I would have gone like anyway. I don't think I want to go back unless the Israelis and like those people aren't going to be there, because it really just ruins your experience, and you just see people so carelessly being there that it almost like hurts being there yourself. And if you want to buy a drink, then you're supporting them, and it's just like a really hard like rock to be in between. And it's kind of like a challenge of like your own morals and like how far you're willing to go to enjoy yourself versus like standing firm in like your protest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We always talk about, thank you, Mara. No, we always talk about, okay, let's free Palestine. Let's do X, Y, and Z. Let's talk to politicians. Let's educate people about it. But let's move forward past all those steps and talk about what we actually envision as a free Palestine, where people can visit the entirety of the land instead of just let's say like the West Bank or like your occupied villages. Like what kind of, let's say, political system would you guys have, or healthcare system?
Hi everyone, it's An'am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm loving all of these ideas, and I love how deep you guys are tapping into just, I mean, it's a very thought-provoking conversation, and I love the direction that you guys are going into. So kudos to all of you ladies. I don't think there's any guys on your committee. So kudos to all of you. Super proud. But furthermore, I was just thinking and reflecting on what you guys were saying. And I think for me, and I think this ties into the second question, for me, it's the whole notion of no longer having a two-tier system. And that, you know, in a political sense, in a human rights sense, in a citizenship sense, in everything, and like access to everything kind of sense. There's this notion when you're there, just like Reem and Rania were just alluding to, it's like having a huwiya versus not having a huwiya, and what that means, that the privileges that come with and are attached to each, you know, ID card, versus, you know, not having it at all, or being just an international or a foreigner and having more privilege and rights, you know, freedom to travel and freedom of movement within the country, right? And then also in the future, you know, this whole two-tier system of like Arab al-Dakhil, Arab 1948 versus Arab, you know, Arab al-Diffa versus Arab, you know, versus Palestinian al-Ghazazwa, and like all of that. And that's putting to the side, you know, what the whole Jewish, you know, the whole Jewish issue or the Zionist case, but just for Palestinians themselves, that whole two-tier system that exists, you know. And then you could take that up onto different levels, just the I think the level of misogyny, you know, and gender discrimination that also unfortunately kind of, you know, seeps its way upwards. So that for me, you know, that's my 2 cents on that.
No, yeah, thank you. And bouncing off of that, actually, something that I'd like to see, you could see this worldwide, not just, let's say, here in America, but like how one, I think, group of people are more superior than others. So in a free Palestine, what I'd love to see is whether like you'd have people of all religions, since it is a holy land for the 3 major religions, that you'd see people of all races and religion and ethnic groups all come together without, let's say, like that tier system that An'am mentioned. That'd be so beautiful. Would anyone like to share what a free Palestine would also look like?
One thing that I first, so like when we had like the idea to have this as the theme, one of the first things that came to my mind was last year I went to like the IMEU gala, and Noura Arakat was given an award there, and she was wearing a dress designed by a Palestinian designer, like Rami Kasho. I think I said his last name right, but the concept pretty much, like, she had recently written a book on like imagining a radical future for Palestine, and she wanted that to like reflect what she was wearing. So she told the designer to like design with like Palestinian futurism in mind, and her dress had like a really like modern silhouette, and then it was like a really like professional like sleek dress, and then there was tatreez alongside it, and it was like a really bright blue color. And to me, like, even though this is something really small, I love the idea of just incorporating so many parts of our culture, you know, into that, and like bringing that into like a modern sense, because I feel like so many people think of like modernization and they put that hand in hand with like westernization, but I think like the beautiful thing about like being Palestinian is that we hold on to our roots and our culture so much, and in a free Palestine, I'd hope to see that incorporated like everywhere. Like, I'd hope to see like hattas like and kufiyas like as like worn like all the time, you know, just like as like street fashion, and not like, it wouldn't have to be like this like really heavy like political thing anymore. Like, we'd remember that, but it wouldn't be like this like strong heavy thing, but more of like, let's embrace like the beauty of our culture.
Mm-hmm. It's not like it's like making a fashion statement. It's more just like, oh, here's my culture, take it or leave it kind of thing, instead of, oh, I'm wearing a hatta, oh, this represents X, Y, and Z for Palestinians kind of thing. Not
Yeah. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Would anyone else like to share something?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, to go off like what Ian says, like, you don't have to like let go of everything, but maybe something that would be worth letting go of is like generational trauma. Maybe instead of like looking at a hatta and that like destroys you, it becomes like what I'm saying of this is my culture and I like wearing this because it represents like me personally.
That definitely makes a lot of sense. So I'm not Palestinian, I'm Egyptian, and I went to public school in New York, and I'm from an area in Long Island that's very heavily populated with like Israeli Jews. And so for a long time growing up, I just didn't know about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I just didn't know it existed. And then I would face like repercussions of being like Arab and just being like existing and not realizing what it meant like to all these other people who had like a wider understanding of like cultural repercussions of what it meant, because like my parents never like talked to me about it, and it wasn't something that like was going to come up in conversation. So when I think of like a free Palestine, I think like there's this notion of like kind of what you guys were talking about, like that tier system and how people are treated, but there's also like how there would be more unity among like Arab in general, because I feel like sometimes I hear other like Arabs talk about Palestinians and they like chastise them for certain decisions that they made in the beginning of like 1948, and it's like we could have never imagined we would be at this point in time. And so like it would just change the dynamic of how different groups are being treated, and I would hope that there's like a greater sense of unity, and you're not like supporting one system because they're like have a more powerful government, and you're actually like representing your values and your beliefs. And like for the people like growing up, like I would be told, like if I ever told anyone about the school I went to, they're like, are you okay? Like, was it okay? And like at the bottom of it, we were just people. Like for a lot of people, they didn't realize it, and for the people that did, we could have like these discussions that like widened our perspective on what the issue was. And it was kind of really radical. Like once I had a teacher tell me like, oh, it's so good that you're going here because you can support us. And I was like, but I don't, like, you know, I like went into the system that's supposed to like brainwash you into thinking like a certain way. And like, I have my own lens and my own understanding of your experiences, but I also like have my own like interpretation of what it means. And I feel like if like a free Palestine would just mean that like there would be a greater like empathy and understanding of that, and people would stop like viewing it as like whether it's like a religious issue or a political issue, and it would just like be on like a human level. Like you guys were just saying, we would just be able to connect. And I feel like that's just really important from like an outsider, like from over here. Yeah.
Leila, you're not an outsider.
Okay.
The land is just as much as yours as the next person, of course. No, so no, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Now, a question for you. When you said your school system, now was it mostly people of all groups, or was it a white school system?
It was mostly a white school system.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like relatively affluent as well. So there was just like a lot of privilege and a lot of like underlying structures involved that you wouldn't like. I didn't realize it until I grew older. Like I my mom was telling me once there was like one girl I wanted to like go on a play date with when I was in like the first grade, and her mom was very against it. And like when you're 6, you don't realize these things, but looking back, it's like, oh no, like they either heard my name, they heard me talk about like my culture, they just have these like interpretations. Or even like in the 3rd grade, there was a bunch of kids in like Hebrew school. They were learning about the Exodus and like about Moses and things like that. And they're like, your ancestors oppressed our ancestors. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because I'm like, the pharaohs and who I am are very far apart. And so like that like cultural understanding was like lacking. And so even like there would be like instances where people would make like terrorist jokes, and I was like, you wouldn't appreciate it if someone made a Holocaust joke, so don't make a terrorist joke. But people didn't get that understanding, and so like it was just frustrating. But you know, the principal of my elementary school, her parents survived the Holocaust, and when she heard about that whole like Egyptian Exodus thing, she was like, no, that's not okay. And she called the Hebrew schools, and she's like, just FYI, like, don't teach your kids this. So like there were structures that were like against it, but there was also like just the structure itself, like, and the people, since the majority of the people looked this specific way, and the popular people were those specific people, it influenced how people viewed things. Like I have friends who told me after they left and talked to other people, they understood the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because when you're in there, it's just so one-sided that you don't understand what's happening. And honestly, like, to be completely like transparent, I would not have known except for like the bombings that were happening in August 2016, and that's when I started learning about things, because I just that type of media and exposure just never came to me, and it just wasn't part of like the discussions that I was having with my peers, and it just didn't even cross my mind, like, which is really sad, because it's like you need this type of exposure, you need these discussions, and it's just like very like hard lines, like you can't have them. And even when I had like discussions with my I guess I thought they were friends, but like I don't know, I changed my mind later, it doesn't matter. I would be like, so you can be anti-Zionism without being anti-Semitic. And like, no, it's mutually exclusive. I'm like, it's so like it's really just hard, like being from like just seeing how like determined people are, and just like the lack of conversation. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of rambled. I'm sorry.
No, you're all good. So going off of the education system, even here in America, it's like in middle school, I remember learning about Christopher Columbus and my whole school like idolizing him. And then it wasn't until like I got to high school and I read for myself, not for the school, where I'm just like, oh, okay, this is what actually happened to the Native Americans. So in a free Palestine, something that could happen, it's not like, oh, this is like the Zionists X, Y, and Z happened to them, whatever may happen for a free Palestine. It'd be more like, here are the facts, this is what happened, without any bias to it.
Yeah.
It's like, regardless of who you're teaching it to.
Yeah, to like go off of that, I posted something once on my like Instagram story about, I think it was Ahed Tamimi, and how she got out of jail, and how like Palestinians are jailing children. And someone I know that like grew up in Israel, and then she came here to school, so that's how we knew each other. She just was like, but they're terrorists, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, they're children. even like as bad as the United States jail system is, we do not treat children this way. Like we do not treat children the way the Israeli army treats children. And so like, but then the conversation continued, and she was justifying what happened with Palestine with what Christopher Columbus did. And I'm like, we as an American population have agreed what Christopher Columbus did was wrong. So like, you can't justify a wrong behavior with another wrong behavior. Like indigenous people deserve their rights, which is really radical for a bizarre reason.
And that goes to the fact that it's like, oh, people always argue, it's like, oh, I was here first, and I was here first. It's like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like your mistreatment of the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
And the American government is doing that to kids by the border.
Yeah.
They're separating the families, and these kids are dying in jails.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Recently, you're right. That's been happening. I guess when I had that conversation, it wasn't recent. So, but you're right. You're totally right. Yeah. But even then, those children, the Americans, oh, but yeah, it's kind of similar. The American government doesn't consider them American, so they're not worthy of like equal rights as American children, in a sense. But then you could argue that like American system doesn't value like the lives of Black children and like children of color in general. So I think there's more parallels that you can see between both systems, which is really depressing.
So, okay. It's really hard for let's say in America to kind of change that system.
Yeah.
Have, let's say, an education system for, let's say, high school, middle school, and elementary school students where there isn't any bias for teachers and their students. And that's something we could hope for in a free Palestine. So let's say we were to have Muslim, Christian, and Jewish students in the same class. It's not like there's a bias there, because hopefully within years to come, people are above that. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.
I guess I'll like interject. I think they've had like the conversation about bias, like a lot of times like in school. I guess like to quote Trevor Noah, because I remember he said it like really, really good. to that one girl, I forgot what her name is, Tommy like Laren or something like that, when she said like, oh, I don't see color. And he was like, it's not about seeing color, it's how you treat color. Like there will always be bias, but that isn't a bad thing. Like I think in conversations about like Palestinians and Israelis and all that stuff, there has to be a bias. It's just an occupation. Like there isn't about like, we can't hurt their feelings. There has to be like a table. We all have to come to that table. I don't think like this situation works like that. Like the same way white people and black people after slavery didn't come to a table. There was still Jim Crow. There was still everything. Nothing ends with a conversation. Nothing ends with having like a white kid, a black kid, and a Jewish kid like sitting in a room. Like not to discredit what you're saying. Of course, that's important to have a conversation, but I don't think bias is a bad thing. It's just what's the bias and where is it coming from? You know what I mean?
And I think it's also being biased against which group of people. So like if you're being biased against Palestinians and Zionists, that's okay, there's going to be a bias there, but no bias within, let's say, religion.
I think
Yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like I think religion is different because like, well, right now in this moment, there isn't like a crusades. Like, you know what I mean? It's like about like the different topics. Like me and you can have a conversation about like the different ways we grew up, and that shouldn't be biased, and we should be like normal about it. But like with other conversations, there has to be like, it's not ever going to be equal. Like Palestinians and Israelis will never be equal enough to have that conversation. We're not. There isn't space for having a equal conversation.
So I want to, sorry, I want to chime in here a little bit. And I think when we did the Freedom is Future class, I kind of alluded to this one time. I don't know if those of you who were in there, Asil and Reem, Najah, maybe you remember. I was talking once about truth, justice, and reconciliation. And it, you know, in a context where we see or can imagine and design a free Palestine, inshallah, we'd have to come to terms with that, right? We'd have to have some kind of a sense of acknowledgement of past wrongdoings, right? There has to be that sense of acknowledgement and seeking justice and reparations for the damage that was done, because, you know, acknowledging, okay, Israel is responsible. They still haven't acknowledged their responsibility, right, towards like 1948 and the whole refugee situation. They're kind of just like sweeping that under the rug, thinking, you know, it's just going to go away in due time if we normalize the situation of refugees, you know, scattered all around the world. So there has to be that sense of acknowledgement, reparations, justice. Reconciliation is a lot more difficult, but I always am very hopeful because I look at the case of Rwanda and the Rwandan genocide. And if you do, you know, if you look at the Rwandan genocide and look at, you know, the reconciliation that they've created within their country, I think that they've made a lot of progress in terms of the bias and the hate that used to exist. Yes, they are of the same ethnic and national background, right? They have like different, they're, you know, the Hutus and the Tutsis, they're different in terms of their tribal affiliations, but they're from the same country, right? So it would obviously be a little bit different in our context, but at the same time, I would just draw inspiration from that and not lose all hope in a sense. You know, there are some things that do tie us back religiously to one another in terms of, you know, if you want to just look at it from a religious perspective. And I know that it's kind of far-fetched when you're living in this present day moment. And I'm not, by no means am I advocating for normalizing relationships or any of that, you know, that stuff. What I'm trying to imagine is a future where there is some space that's created for acknowledgement, reparations, justice, and some form of reconciliation where, inshallah, we can create that open and more welcoming space and environment where no one's rights are trumping over others. So, you know, and they do that in different countries. In this country, for example, we never had reconciliation with our past. So if you guys look at, for example, there's a museum that was erected by Brian Stevenson and the Justice Initiative Project. I think it's in Alabama or something, where they created a memorial for all the past victims of lynchings in the United States of America. and they memorialize those stories and bring them to life and acknowledge the fact that, yeah, we as a country did this to these people, right? Like, we need to be able to own up to it, acknowledge it, and you know, and face it, because if we just continue to bury it, then we're never going to be able to overcome it and pass it. So you see the same thing happening like with the Holocaust Museum in Germany, right? Like, Germany erected a Holocaust museum. What? So, I mean, in that sense, so there is definitely space to draw some hope so as not to fall into the pitfalls of just pessimism. So that's one way to look at it.
What steps do you think that could happen though? Like, let's say the land is established as Palestine. Do you think that's before or after we establish our freedom?
I think freedom needs to come first. I think freedom needs to come first, and then you could take care of, and then all of these other pieces, building blocks, really, you could start designing them and imagining them. But I think, you know, you have to attain freedom first and then work towards it. I don't see reconciliation and justice and reparations and acknowledgement happening before we actually have access to freedom.
Yeah, I meant like at the same time for it to be happening, or it's kind of just like, all right, let's just.
I think it's a piecemeal process. Yeah, I think it's a piecemeal process, and I think it's imagining more of a long-term vision, and yeah, allowing the pieces to fall together, but can't really force it within a couple of years. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Anam.
You're welcome.
I have something interesting to add. There's a psychological experiment done, don't know when. It's called the Robbers Cave experiment. And so what they did, they wanted to look at bias and see how, like, if you created bias, how you could remove it. So what this, like, the man who did this experiment, what he did, he like took two groups of like adolescent boys who were in the same age range, and he split them up into teams, and he like fed one group like really bad like ideas about the other group, so he created bias amongst them and prejudice amongst them against the other group. And then he did the same thing with the other group, and then he had them compete for the same resource. So they were at like a camp and they wanted to win some sport, and then at the end he's like, how do I create so he found that, like, because there was this idea that was thought that if you put everyone at the table together, they'll get along with each other, but that doesn't happen. It's what he found, because he was like, let me just put them all together now that I created bias and see what happens. And he found that each group sat with its like cohort, and they didn't interact with one another, and there was no like intermingling or like fixing against the prejudice they did. So he's like, how can I like remove the prejudice from I just created among these like adolescent boys? So what he did, he created on the bus on the way back, he created like an accident that everyone had to collaborate together. And he told them, now we're not teams against each other, and we're going to work together to solve this issue. So what he did, he equaled the playing field amongst them. So there was no I'm better than you, you're better than me. And they had like equal identities, equal labels. And then he also created a common goal for them to like solve an issue. And that helped them to like reevaluate why they were biased against each other. And they actually worked together towards that common goal, and then eventually became friends with one another. And they like lost their bias against each other. And so like this was like a whole study that was done, and there was like actual like a real life example that was done from it, and they kind of like made it into a movie. Do you remember the Titans? The same concept on this like same study, but like it shows that like that getting along with like other groups of people that you're opposed to is possible, but it requires all of these like steps. Because like even remember the Titans, they were black players and they were white like football players, and it was during integration. And so he told them, you're not black, you're not white, you're all football players, we need to work together to like succeed. So he didn't create this like hierarchy in their identities. They were suddenly all like equal and the same. And like I think reaching that point is really just difficult because you have generations of like this trauma that has developed and these identities that have developed. And even like right now, like integration has happened since the 50s, but like it's been over 50 years, but we're still like struggling with all of the issues that segregation and slavery has caused, and there's still like bias against Black people. So it's like we're working towards a direction that's going against it, but it takes like I think you can't work within the system itself. You kind of have to unmantle the system and then like build a new system that fixes that. So I feel like a free Palestine would have that new system hopefully in place as it's created. Like I feel like when it comes to freeing it, you also have to like have a system in place right away, or else everything will like just topple down, because no freedom like comes without like some sort of like, you have to have a plan moving forward. You can't just, I don't know, wing it. I don't know if I'm making sense anymore, but yeah.
You are making sense. So it's not like, oh, okay, free Palestine, and then what's next? It's like our leaders should know what to do next. Like, okay, let's establish a government system. Let's establish like the way our economy is going to work. Let's establish our healthcare system. Let's establish our infrastructure, and going forward with that.
I think like bouncing off of that, and like one of the reasons why I think this like theme is so important to think about is, alhamdulillah, I feel like Palestinians are in like such an interesting place, where like, you know, if we do, like I feel like oftentimes like our minds is like, okay, freedom, but we don't think of like, okay, what comes after that. But you know, we have, inshallah, like, God willing, like when we do achieve freedom, like we have like the free, like we truly do, we have the freedom to like create the kind of society that we want to see. And I think that's why it's like really important for us to be thinking about that, especially Palestinians in the diaspora, because like I don't know about you guys, but like if I had like a free Palestine with like a good like infrastructure or anything, like I'd be back there right away. Like that's, you know what I mean? And I think when we think about like the reasons why we left, I think we can find the solutions for like the future that we want to see. Like, you know, like it's hard, like the economy isn't good, or like, you know, there's no opportunities, or there's like no freedom of movement. Like these are the kind of issues that we left our homelands in order to like, you know, solve for ourselves. But inshallah, like when we have a freed Palestine, these are the kind of things that we want to think of like when we're building it from the ground up. And so like just like segueing like into like the theme, I'd love if like anyone could like think of like brainstorm like an idea of like a piece they'd want to write, or like something they'd want to contribute, like kind of like centering around this idea of like what can we build.
Thank you, Liam. So bouncing off of that, if I'm not mistaken, Rania did type in the email for the magazine if you guys would like to submit any art, poem, any news articles for the upcoming issue. You could just email that email, and hopefully you guys will be featured in the magazine. I appreciate all your thoughts and your ideas for a free Palestine, inshallah. I'm gonna pass the floor to Rania to talk a little bit about the 2020 census.
Sorry, guys. I just have one quick question. I don't know if I missed it in the beginning or not, but so you're talking about the next issue for the Philistine magazine, which is when are the submissions due?
So submissions will be due March 30th, inshallah. But we also know that this is like a trying time. So like if you need like a few days extension, just please reach out, let me know. As long as we're in communication about it and I know something's coming, just that's it.
Do you have like an outline of the pieces that you're already expecting?
Yeah, we have a few. Yeah, we have like a few pieces that we're like currently like waiting for and that we've received, but we just extended the deadline just because we know like everyone's at home and stuff, and I feel like this is a really good way to like play with your creativity and just think about something other than the coronavirus.
Okay, cool. I'll reach out to you, Reem, inshallah. Thanks.
Awesome, inshallah. Thank you.
No problem.
And yeah, if anyone has any final questions or anything, and then before we like switch over to the census. Yeah.
I think we're good. All right, Rani, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you guys. I apologize, my webcam isn't working. My laptop's acting up. But thank you guys for a wonderful discussion. I'm very, very excited that this launched our Palestine Mondays series. So as part of our response to keeping people entertained and educated and giving them a platform to discuss, we're launching a series for every day of the week. So Mondays are Palestine Mondays, Tuesdays are How-To Tuesdays, Wednesdays are Workshop Wednesdays, Thursdays are Game Night Thursdays, Fridays are Community Check-In Fridays, and Saturdays are Serene Saturdays, and Sundays are Book Challenge Sundays. Yes, it is a mouthful, but our goal is to keep everyone entertained throughout the week. So if you guys are interested in this series, next week we're going to be doing a panel with some of our people that have gone on the Homeland Project, which is a trip that we do where we send 10 youth to Palestine for about 10 days, and we're going to talk about their experience and what it's like. The week after, I'm very excited to announce that we actually just got confirmation that we're going to be doing a webinar with Dr. Rashid Khalidi on his newest book. So it's really exciting. So that's going to be happening the week after that. And then we're working on getting other events in order. Like we're reaching out to Nur Arikat, we're reaching out to IMEU, and we're trying to see if we can set up different webinars like that. So thank you guys for joining. We're really, really happy and excited to be launching this series. And then without further ado, another, really important thing that's going on. I know, like Kareem said, there's a lot of craziness going on with COVID and everything that's going on with that, but we want to encourage you all to take the census. So do not forget to take the census. You should have all received a letter in the mail. If you have not, you don't have to wait for the letter of the mail. You can just go online. So I'm going to play a short video. Hopefully it works and we're good to go. And then after that, I'll take any questions. Can everyone see the video?
Yes.
No, it just was playing. Don't do this to me. 1 second, guys. I apologize. Give me 1 second. To this, share.
Sensational Communities presentation. Thanks for tuning in to PAC's Sensational Communities
Did I share it? I shared my screen, right? Okay.
presentation. Today we'll be talking about the importance of the census, and if you stick around until the end, you'll be eligible to win an Amazon gift card. Stay tuned. So what is the census? The census is a decennial survey that is conducted by the government to generate demographic information and to determine where billions of dollars of federal funding are allocated. The census is for everyone, regardless of legal status. We all count. You might be wondering how the census benefits you. Census funding is used to ensure that money is sent to programs like Medicare, WIC, food stamps, workforce development, and more. Everything from your town's roads to your town's public schools and after-school programs are funded by the census. Furthermore, the census determines political representation. The census determines how many representatives we get in Congress, and for the first time in history, the census allows participants to write in their race and ethnicity. This is wonderful news for Arab Americans, as we can write in what we identify as, and hopefully evoke change in leadership. We need to show the U.S. that Arab Americans count too. We matter. The census is completely safe. Your information is protected by Title 13 of the U.S. Code. Even the President of the United States cannot access your information. Census can only be used to derive demographic data. Any violation of this will result in 5 years of jail or a $250,000 fine. Attorneys across the country are enforcing these rules and protecting your information. The census is also super easy to fill out. For the first time ever, it's available online and over the phone. It's even available in Arabic. Of course, you can still fill out the paper form if one was mailed to you. Didn't get anything in the mail? No problem. You can still head over to 2020census.gov to complete your census right now. And if you have any questions, you can always contact PAC. The census is super important, it's safe, and it's easy, but you must look out for scams. The Census Bureau will never ask you for any credit card information, debit card information, bank account information, or your social security number, and the Census Bureau will never call you at your house. Any questions? You can always contact Dala Ismail at tismail@pacusa.org or text the PAC Census Hotline from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. daily at 973-963-7267. Thanks so much. Be sure to fill out the survey at the end of this to be entered into the raffle for the Amazon gift card. Make sure to fill out your 2020 census. We count.
Okay, so I hope that was very informative and educational to everybody. I'm going to be putting the link to the Census Amazon gift card giveaway in the chat box. It literally takes like less than 2 minutes to fill out. So if you can fill it out, that would be fantastic. Thank you guys so much for a great event, and I'm gonna pass it back to Reem Marah Nasil to end it off.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rania. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone who came. Please, I think the link isn't working. Inshallah, we'll get another one sent. But thank you so much to everyone who came onto this webinar. If you guys have any questions, please email me. And
Sorry,
I'll
just
have
give me
my
1
email.
second. I just need to put the permission. Sorry, go on.
No worries, you're good. Okay, so inshallah, yeah, so fill out that link, everyone. And if you guys are interested in contributing, or if you guys know anyone who's interested in contributing, please, please, please tell them about Falastin Magazine. You don't have to be Palestinian to write for our magazine. You just have to have a passion for justice and for Palestine. So please let us know. And if you guys need anything or you have any questions, please reach out. I'm going to write my email again down here. So thank you guys.
I just had a question real quick.
Yeah.
Where can I find like access for the series information that Renee was talking about?
Yeah. That's a Rania question, but I think it would be it's on Instagram, right, Rania?
Yeah, we're going to be posting it on Instagram just because obviously all of this is very new to us. So this week is going to be a little bit slower, the posting. But if you follow us on Instagram, we're posting each of the things that way. You can also, we're going to be posting it on our mailing list, which you can go to our website, www.paccusa.org. I'll put the information in the chat box, and then /subscribe, and you can subscribe to our mailing list. And lastly, our the same link that you use to register for this event. So if you went to paccusa.org/upcoming events, all of our events are going to be there as well. So we would love to have you guys join all our events, and thank you guys.
All right, thank you.
Thanks again, everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Take care.